Eliphaz responds first, and he's kind of cautious at the beginning. He says, if one ventures a word with you, will you be offended? But, now that's not very good. Because I think we've all learned from experience that when someone says, now I hope what I'm going to say is not going to offend you, well, it truly usually means that it is going to offend you, and I should have stopped right there. And that's exactly what happens with Eliphaz. He says, but who can keep from speaking? Well, he should. And so begins rounds and rounds of dialogue, which make up the heart of the book of Job. They're fascinating. And I hope that you're reading them through this month, and if not, I invite you to start. The friends begin to comfort Job, but their words of comfort are the sort of traditional thinking that they think will be comforting, but Job says really isn't. Eliphaz says, how happy is the one whom God reproves? Bildad asks, does God pervert justice? Zophar scolds, know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. Well, Elie Wiesel, the Auschwitz survivor and Nobel Peace Prize winner, writes powerfully of this story in his book, The Messengers of God. And one would imagine that a survivor of the Holocaust would have important things to say about the book of Job. Wiesel writes that certain griefs beget a silence that is commensurate to them. Words only betray them. And he then goes on to reflect on these three friends. We are moved by the three silent friends, but the moment they begin to speak, they disappoint. Talkative, critical, their emotions seem false and calculated. They had to choose between taking a stand for their beaten and defeated friend or for God. And they made the wrong choice, the easy one. He suffered and they made speeches on suffering. He was crushed by sorrow and they built theories and systems on the subjects of grief, suffering, and persecution. I suppose that many of you have actually experienced something like this, because I know I have. When my father died, people said some of the stupidest things. I knew that they generally meant well. They were trying to express words of sympathy and comfort, but they ended up sounding stupid at best and cruel at worst. This week, when I posted on my Facebook what the sermon topic was, I got feedback from a variety of folks who wrote of their own experiences like this with friends, including times they had felt betrayed by close friends. And this was Job's experience. As the dialogue worsens and what the friends are saying can only be a betrayal of his pain and his suffering. No more in solidarity. They really themselves become agents of abuse. While I was a student at Oklahoma Baptist University, our dean of the Joe L. Lincoln School of Christian Service was Dick Gregory. Dick and his wife Sue had been career missionaries in Zambia. When Sue came down with a severe illness in 1978 that the physicians were unable to ever diagnose. Sue and Dick were forced to pick up their young family and relocate to South Africa, leaving most of their possessions behind because they could not carry them overland because of the war in Zimbabwe at the time. After less than a year in South Africa and no further improvement, they returned to the United States. And 3 years later, after a variety of treatments, ended up resigning their mission employment and settled into their life in the U.S. Sometime after that, Sue actually experienced a healing. Pain and illness went away. But in the early 90s, she began to experience a different pain, which led to a diagnosis in 1994 of severe osteoporosis, which eventually led to her being wheelchair bound and severely restricting her life. I remember at the time as she became weaker and weaker, and one did not see her very often at university events. And one time I went up to shake her hand, and she had to explain that she was unable to shake hands anymore. Well, one day in 1995, Sue read through the entire book of Job in about 3 hours and found the experience meaningful. And so she and Dick decided that they would read through the book of Job together and write letters back and forth to each other as to what they were experiencing and reflecting on. They admit that it was an effort to create more intimacy in the relationship, which had suffered greatly through years of illness. Well, in 1997, they published these letters as a book entitled A Road Beyond Suffering, an experiential journey through the book of Job. It's a powerful read, very personal and intimate, filled with serious struggle with Scripture and issues that arrive at the intersections of suffering and faith. Sue writes, the quote on your bulletin reminds me, some of the deepest hurts in my life have come through the words of my friends who thought they were being helpful. Among the things friends had said to her were, well, surely it's not that bad, and smile, it's going to get better. Or they asked her to do something she couldn't do it. They'd say, you can't? But you will. Or, the doctors will be able to help you, they just haven't figured out to yet, or God hasn't shown them how. Reflecting on statements like this and the bad theology they reveal, Sue wrote, how do I explain to a world who has not experienced the ultimate grief of losing oneself that I am just trying to find the guts to go on? I just want to be the same person I always was, but my body won't let me. How can they know how much I want them to be right, but in my heart I know that they are dead wrong? For Sue Rader, the worst pain is not the physical, but the inability to be the person that she always had been and wanted to be. And the attempts at comfort added to the pain because they didn't take the time to see what the real pain actually was. The flip comment is too easy, a disservice, as she calls it. In another letter, she mildly rebukes her husband's attempts at comfort and says, in trying to comfort me, so many people tell me things that I already know that I begin to believe that they must think I'm losing my mind. And I think that's a significant observation we should remember. Illness and pain can rob us of so much of our personal identity, and many of the things that go on in this society to treat the sick actually further the indignity and make matters worse. Part of what Hans has been working on in the issue of pain treatment, that often hospitals and medical professionals don't trust the patient and don't listen to what they have to say about what they're feeling. This sort of mistreatment makes the illness worse because not only does it not treat the physical issue, it furthers the indignity and lessens the person's self-worth. So Job responded to his friend's efforts at comfort. He said, look, my eye has seen all of this. My ear has heard and understood it. What you know, I also know. I am not inferior to you. But I would speak with the Almighty, and I would desire to argue my case with God. As for you, you whitewash with lies. All you are worthless physicians. If you would only keep silent, that would be your wisdom. Your maxims are proverbs of ashes. Your defenses are defenses of clay. Well, other than silent presence, is there anything that we can say or do in trying to comfort someone who's suffering? Sue Rader herself comes to this conclusion. I hurt because you hurt. Maybe all we can say truthfully. Trying to figure out the whys is surely the broad road to inflicting more pain. Nance also suggests the same I'm confused or I'm angry would work. Basically, the not assuming that you know, that you have answers, that you can divine God's will. Simple statements of suffering alongside a person. Well, as the dialogue develops, Job keeps defending himself. And maybe in an ironic way, the dialogue calls forth new life in Job. Scholar Richard B. Sewell wrote of Job's friends that their arguments sting and thrust, kindling new energies in him and compelling him to ever greater expressive effort.